You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
If Syracuse football is fortunate enough to land Penn State starting wide receiver Omari Evans in the transfer portal, he instantly becomes the number one wide receiver on Syracuse football's depth chart. So let's go over the hypothetical wide receiver room. Let's say he visits this weekend and they don't let him leave the building until there is a deal in place, right? That's what I hope happens. I sincerely hope that happens, all right? The starting wide receivers, you have Amari Evans to stretch the field. You also got Darrell Gill. Darrell Gill, I have said many times here on this podcast, I think he is due for a big jump in year 3. He already took a big jump from year 1 to year 2 in college football. I think he's going to take an even bigger leap in year 3. And then you also got Trebor Pena, who I referenced in the last segment as arguably the best slot receiver in all of college football, especially because Xavier Restrepo from Miami is out of eligibility and is in the NFL draft. Trebor Pena arguably is now the best slot guy. On paper, Omari Evans, Darrell Gill, Trebor Pena, I don't know about you all, and you can tell me right now, I feel like that's a really good 1-2-3 punch. I feel that is a really, really good starting wide receiver room. Let me know in the comments section below, but that's enticing. I like it. Then the depth receivers, in no particular order. Here are some of the names to look out for, right? Emmanuel Ross, a 2024 4-star wide receiver for the Orange. He redshirted this past season. Who knows? Maybe he could take a big jump in his first full season in college football. After all, he was a 4-star recruit, right? Then you got Amari Hatcher. It's funny how we're talking about two Amaris here on the podcast. Amari Hatcher is a veteran deep threat wide receiver. Then you got Zeed Haynes. Zeed Haynes played in 2 games this past season. He looked decent in those 2 games, but then he had some personal issues and he missed the rest of the year. Now, all signs indicate that he's back with the team. He did not enter the transfer portal, at least during the fall window. We'll see if he enters it in the spring. Not to say that he will, but that would be another opportunity if he decided to, just like everyone else on the roster for the Orange. But as of right now, he's on the team. He is a former 4-star Georgia recruit in 2023. He redshirted his first season at Georgia. High hopes for him last season. He actually entered as the team's number 1 wide receiver before he missed the rest of the year. So Zeed Haynes, he goes from the starting wide receiver or the number 1 wide receiver for the Orange entering 2023 to probably a depth option to start next season if you get a guy like Amari Evans to commit to Syracuse. There's also Justice Ross Simmons, the Colorado State transfer, who in my opinion also entered last season potentially as a starting wide receiver, but he was dealing with a nagging hamstring injury towards the end of camp, which bled into the season. And by the time he even got healthy, there were too many receivers on the roster that had already emerged. So it was tough for a guy like Justice Ross Simmons to really carve out a role last season, but he was really good at Colorado State. And I had high hopes for him. Now, again, you get Omari Evans. He profiles more as a depth guy next year. And finally, you also got Tyshawn Russell, who Syracuse added in the transfer portal already from South Carolina, a low-risk, high-reward move. So overall, this wide receiver room with Omari Evans, it gets better at the top. And because it gets better at the top, it slides everyone down, which also increases the depth on the roster. If they get Omari Evans, it is essentially Omari Evans for Chris Long, who just opened up his recruitment after committing to Syracuse. I'll take that trade any day of the week. Anytime, anywhere. I'll take Omari Evans over Chris Long Jr. The unit would be deeper, and it would also be better at the top. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section below. I'll leave off with this, all right? I don't think Syracuse football, quote unquote, needs Omari Evans. I would love if he joined the team. I would love it. But I don't think they need him because, like I said, they have so much depth already on the roster at wide receiver. So let's say Omari Evans does not commit. He goes to Texas Tech or Tennessee or Washington. The two starting wide receivers would be Darrell Gill and Trebor Pena, and then there would be one more open spot. And I think all 5 candidates that I mentioned as depth guys right now could take that spot and do more than a serviceable job, probably even much better than a serviceable job, in my opinion. So they don't need him, but it would certainly be an amazing addition for Syracuse football if they can get him. And since Chris Long already decided to reopen his recruitment, why not? They have the spot already ready for him. Why not look to add him? So Syracuse football expected to get a visit from potentially a game-changing wide receiver in Amari Evans.